sobbing openly for the first time in decades, and over the weeks that followed he tried to make amends the only way he knew how at first, with money, offering to buy the house, to pay for schools, to fix everything. But Evelyn refused at first, telling him love didn't come with a price tag and that trust had to be earned. And so Charles did something radical, something no boardroom had ever demanded of him. He stayed. He visited every day, he listened, he learned Maya's favorite books, helped her rebuild a carburetor on the Mustang, attended school meetings, and slowly the walls between them lowered. And a twist came when Charles discovered through old records that the land Evelyn's house sat on was slated for redevelopment by one of his own companies, meaning he had unknowingly been responsible for threatening the very family he had lost. And in a move that shocked investors and made headlines, Charles halted the project, redirecting funds to create a community trade school focused on automotive engineering and skilled labor, naming it after Maya's mother, and the public praised his generosity without knowing the real reason. And another twist followed when a former business partner tried to blackmail Charles with knowledge of his past abandonment. But Charles stood firm, publicly admitting his failures in an interview that went viral, saying success meant nothing without responsibility, and America watched as a hardened tycoon humbled himself. And through it all Maya remained the quiet center, still wearing the ring, still fixing engines, reminding Charles with innocent honesty that broken things could be fixed if you didn't give up on them. And years later, on the day Maya received a full scholarship to a top engineering university, she handed the ring back to Charles and said it was time he wore it again, that promises could be renewed, and Charles slipped it onto his own finger, not as a symbol of ownership or regret but of commitment, standing beside the Mustang now fully restored, surrounded by a family he almost lost forever, understanding at last that the greatest legacy wasn't money or machines but showing up, staying present, and choosing love when it mattered most. A lesson that began with a little black girl on a hot afternoon, a broken car, and a ring that refused to let the past stay buried. If you love powerful, emotional stories with shocking twists that change lives forever, make sure you subscribe right now, because this story will stay with you long after it ends, and you won't want to miss what comes next. On a quiet, sun-bleached afternoon in a struggling neighborhood on the edge of Detroit, where cracked sidewalks met memories of better days, a dusty black 1967 Ford Mustang sat coughing and dying on the side of the road like a wounded animal, its hood propped open and its once proud engine ticking angrily as if offended by the years, and beside it stood Charles Whitmore, a self-made millionaire known in glossy magazines for ruthless business deals and a carefully curated image of success, now sweating through his tailored shirt and staring helplessly at the machinery he had bought more for nostalgia than need, when a small voice cut through the heat and frustration, a little black girl no more than 10 years old asking calmly if he'd checked the distributor cap, and Charles barely registered her at first, assuming she was just another curious kid passing by, until he realized she was already leaning over the engine bay with confidence that didn't match her age, her hands smudged with grease, her eyes sharp and observant. And that was when he noticed the ring on her finger, absurdly elegant for a child, a thin gold band with a distinctive engraving that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't immediately explain. And as she explained in simple, clear terms that Mustangs like this had a habit of vapor lock in the heat, and that he should let it cool while checking a loose wire near the coil, Charles felt his irritation dissolve into disbelief as the engine roared back to life under her guidance, drawing a laugh from the girl and stunned silence from him. And when he finally looked at her properly, he saw not just a child but a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself, the way she wiped her hands on her faded dress without embarrassment, and when he asked her name she said it was Maya, that she lived nearby with her grandmother, and that she fixed cars after school because machines make sense when people don't. A line that struck Charles harder than any insult ever had, and as he thanked her and reached for his wallet she shook her head firmly, saying she didn't want money, just wanted to make sure he got home safe. And that was when the ring caught the sunlight again and Charles felt a wave of nausea. Because he recognized it now, or rather he recognized the engraving style. A custom piece he had designed decades earlier for a woman he had loved and then abandoned in his relentless pursuit of success. A woman who had disappeared from his life after one devastating argument and a letter he never opened. And suddenly the past he had buried under millions of dollars and steel towers clawed its way back, and he asked Maya where she got the ring. And her face changed, just slightly, a flicker of sadness, crossing her features as she said it had belonged to her mother, who had passed away, and that her grandmother said it was important, that it meant someone once made a promise, and Charles felt the world tilt as fragments of memory aligned into something terrifyingly clear. And he offered Maya a ride home, insisting, and she hesitated only long enough to nod, climbing into the Mustang with the ease of someone used to broken things, and as they drove through streets Charles had never bothered to see. Despite owning half the city on paper, he learned that Maya's grandmother, Evelyn, was strict but kind, that money was always tight but love wasn't, and that Maya dreamed of becoming an engineer. And when they arrived at a modest house with peeling paint, Charles's heart nearly stopped when Evelyn opened the door, older now, lines etched deep by time and disappointment, but unmistakably the woman he had once loved, and the silence between them was louder than any argument they'd ever had. And before Charles could speak, Evelyn looked at the ring on Maya's finger and then at him and said quietly, "So you finally noticed?" And the truth spilled out in a rush that left Charles reeling, that Evelyn had been pregnant when he walked away, that she'd written him letters he never answered, that Maya's mother, his daughter, had grown up without him and died young from an illness made worse by poverty, and that Maya was his granddaughter. And in that moment all the wealth and power Charles had accumulated felt grotesquely small, and he sank into a chair as the weight of generations of absence crushed him. And Maya stood there watching, piecing together what adults thought she couldn't understand, and asked in a small, steady voice if this meant he was family. And Charles broke then, "Ko.